You were once a baby. You cried, you said you were hungry, you asked if we were there yet, and then you did it all again. For around the first 18 years of your life, your parents gave you everything they had to raise you. You gave them love, of course, and gave them something to do, but you didn't pay out a dividend at the end of every year from a tax on your lemonade stand profits. And yeah, you may have vacuumed the floors or emptied the dishwasher a few times, but were you really a good investment?
The thing that you have to understand about kids is they're unbelievably good company. And so they pay you back for your care of them. And by being ridiculously amusing, they're little clowns. And they're doing crazy little stunts all the time. And they have a sense of humor that kicks in.
A lot of people would say yes, you were a good investment. Reproduction is ultimately the basic primal purpose of a human being. Without it, you wouldn't watch this video and I wouldn't make it. But some people are starting to go against their natural instinct.
I don't have kids, and I couldn't be happier.
Part of this is because of one number: 233,610. The average cost of raising a child in America for the first 18 years of life, which doesn't even include the price of college, which might double that number. This cost comes from things like housing, food, and childcare, and it's a reason a lot of people aren't having kids, especially when those things keep getting more expensive. But we're also getting richer as a society, allowing us to do more than just have kids.
I treat my career as my baby. It's a total cliche, but it's true. Our digital job and our child-free situation makes it super easy to travel or to move to a new country at the drop of a hat.
And since both of us loved our careers, travel, and freedom to pursue our various hobbies, not having kids felt like the best way to continue living the way we wanted.
And that's why a lot of us minimalists don't have kids. It's a less complicated life.
When the 76 million baby boomers were born in the US, a little more than 30% of women were in the workforce, making it much easier for them to take care of a bunch of kids. In the last decade, though, that number has almost doubled, with nearly 60% of women having a job. In this same period, the fertility rate, which is the average amount of babies each woman has over her lifetime, has been cut in half from a steady family of 3 or 4 to just 1 or 2. This isn't just happening in the US either. All over the world, as countries develop, fertility rates are falling. Singapore went from one of the highest rates in the world at 5.76 in 1960 to one of the lowest at just 1.14. Japan, Italy, South Korea, and Russia also have seen big drops in their births. Meanwhile, Niger and Somalia still have fertility rates over 6. But for most people, apart from a parent wanting grandchildren, this dropping rate isn't much of a problem, as it's seen as just a side effect of prosperity. But governments don't see it the same way.
It's a very serious problem because whether it's Singapore, whether it's Hong Kong, whether it's London, cities generally do not reproduce themselves. They top themselves up. TFR fertility rates are low, and cities are vibrant by attracting talent from outside. And we have to keep a balance because, as I said, we are a city as well as a nation, and we have to have enough of a core to keep that nation in the next generation.
This is the Prime Minister of Singapore. After World War II, Singapore was having a baby boom just like most of the world, but Lee Kuan Yew, the Prime Minister at the time, thought this would lead to overpopulation. Too many people could lead to more poverty, overuse of natural resources, and extremely high levels of competition. This was especially serious for Singapore because its tiny footprint can only cater to so many people. So Singapore made its policy stop at 2, and promoted it with banners and policy changes showing 2 children was enough. Because of newly legalized abortion, penalties for having more than 2 children, and the general economic growth of Singapore, people stopped having as many babies. But everyone wasn't affected the same way.
I said, no, this cannot be true. This is disastrous. Because we have brought down the birth rate, but unequally. And we found women with age 40 and below with no education, on average, they produce 3 children. With tertiary, university, 1 and 1/4. Will be done for. Men marry their equals or their educational subordinates. Very seldom does the man marry his educational superior. If I want my pension paid, I must have a government that's functioning.
Governments love babies, but not the same way a parent does. One of the largest targets of a government is to foster economic development. which can create a ripple effect of improving living standards, making people happier, and gaining more power. So to a government, babies are an investment, especially when they're highly productive members of society who can contribute taxes and labor. But the thing about babies is that the poor and uneducated have more of them than their educated counterparts. For Singapore, that's especially bad, because if the country has anything going for it, that's labor. But if they don't have quality workers, they have nothing.
We are really discarding our able parents in the next generation and doubling the less able. A boy or a girl is what he or she is. No schooling, no magic teacher or magic professor can make a genius out of a non-genius. You're either born bright, energetic, skillful, or you're born not so bright, not so energetic, not so skillful. But everybody has a share to contribute.
So in the 1980s, they tried to get educated parents to have more kids. Singapore started giving people $7,000 and 7 days of paid time off just to get sterilized, but only if they were poor and uneducated. Then graduates were given preferences in school choice for their kids, and they even got tax cuts for each child. On top of that, the government made an entire department dedicated to being a matchmaker for the educated. This was all called the Graduate Mother Scheme, and it worked. People didn't like being told what to do though, and the policy was largely eugenic. So the government stopped the movement and instead gave benefits to the poor. Then a few years later, the government realized that even though the policies were gone, people were still not having kids. So Stop It 2 quickly changed to have 3 or more if you can afford it. Then, to make sure these new kids coming from various backgrounds were well prepared, they built up a strong school system. Singapore isn't the only country doing anything to get more workers though.
Say hello to little baby Yotaru. The sharp-witted amongst you will have noticed that Yotaru isn't a real baby, he's just a flesh-coloured balloon. Yes, balloon.
We hope Yotaru will make people want to start their own families.
Remove his swaddling clothes and he's all robot.
Japan is doing everything it can to increase its fertility rate by having robot babies and giving more paid leave and other subsidies for childcare. But still, many people struggle to find a work-life balance in a culture that drives many to work multiple jobs up to 70 hours a week. Russia is also experiencing a demographic problem, which led one region to create a holiday which was specifically designated to procreation.
It's not just for fun and games. The government is trying to help boost Russia's low birth rate. And I understand there are even prizes involved for couples who give birth in exactly 9 months or so.
That's right, Amy. 9 months from now is June 12th. It's a Russian holiday. It's Russia Day. And if you give birth on that day, that's the day that you get the prizes. This past year, the grand prize was a Jeep. Next year, it's going to be an apartment for the lucky young couple. This past year, they had 78 babies born on that day, and they're hoping to break the record this coming year.
All of these countries are doing these things to get their fertility rate to 2.1. which is enough to replace the population while accounting for early mortality. But few changes have actually come.
I mean, it was falling for a long time, but it's been where it is now for the last 4 or 5 years. So I would count that to the efforts which we have been making to prevent it from falling further. But it's not enough, and we need to try and push it up a little bit more.
One way Singapore tried to do that was by giving people what's called a baby bonus. In it, the government offers benefits like a cash grant, tax rebate, care subsidies, and a bunch of other things worth about $120,000 just for having 2 kids. But even after all of that, in Singapore, Japan, and elsewhere around the world, a lot of people just don't want to do what their governments tell them to do. For example, Singapore made this song.
It's National Night. Yeah, it's National Night, and I want a baby. Oh, I know you want it, so does the STU.
But the propaganda from that video only lasts until you go into the comments, which show what people actually think. People are still more likely to follow the Chinese zodiac calendar than any government mandates. This is why there's a huge spike of births on the year of a dragon, since it's associated with good luck and success, even though it often has the opposite effect for more competition. If history can teach us anything, this is probably just part of a cycle. Just like there was a huge surge of births after the Spanish flu and the World Wars, the coronavirus, or just a downward trend in population, might give people the desire to reproduce. But for right now, we're still a growing population, so I wouldn't say we're quite doomed. If you like this video, subscribe, because I'm sure you'll be back next time, here on Sparkpass.